Hello, my dear warriors. For centuries, the darkest powers ruled through dread. They bent kings, breathed into forces, rewrote destinies in silence. They interfered everywhere, touching every soul that walked the earth. But when it came to you, they stopped. They hesitated, because something else was already moving with you, an unseen force. Older than their curses, stronger than their chains, a presence they could not challenge. Understand this. Every power feeds on vulnerability. They prey on dread, on doubt, on cracks in the soul. But when they looked at you, there was no opening. Not because you were flawless, but because you were shielded. Every step you took carried a weight that wasn't yours alone. Every silence you held pulsed with something beyond comprehension. They felt it before you did, and it shook them. The darkest powers live on interference. They manipulate, control, dominate. But when they circled you, they saw no entry point. Every path toward you bent back against them. Every scheme they cast dissolved into dust, and in their chambers of breaths, they admitted what they could not bear to speak aloud. Something walks with them, something we dare not confront. That is why they won't interfere, not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford it. The cost is not merely defeat, it is collapse beyond repair. To move against you is to move against the force that shields you. And that force does not negotiate. It does not warn. It simply silences. You may not always feel it. You may think you are walking alone. But shadows know the truth. That's why they recoil. That's why they retreat. They sense what you carry, even when you doubt it yourself. They sense a power that rearranges reality around your steps. And so, the story begins not with their strength, but with their hesitation. Not with their interference, but with their silence. Because even the darkest powers know the cost of crossing your path is dangerously high. The unseen force doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar. It doesn't reveal itself in spectacle. It moves in silence. Yet its silence bends louder than storms. That is why the darkest powers hesitate. They thrive on chasing weakness. But when they trace your path, all they find is stillness they cannot breach. Understand this. Interference is their language. They step into lives to twist them. They plant shadows in the corners of minds. They breathe until doubts turn into chains. But when they tried that with you, every chain broke before it locked. Every breath died before it reached your ear. And they realized the truth. They were not opposing you. They were opposing the force that walks beside you. That force has no face, no name. Yet its presence overwhelms them more than forces. It does not swing forces. It doesn't even block them. It simply exists in such weight that any move against you becomes their undoing. That is why their silence is louder than their curses. Their refusal is louder than their interference. Kings have noticed. They sit in halls of power and wonder why the shadows bend around your steps. They ask themselves, why do the darkest rulers avoid the one they should most desire to undo? And the question itself is proof, for kings know one truth about power. What it avoids is what it secretly dreads. Soldiers, too, breathe it. They see how forces collapse when sent against you. Not from your hand, but from unseen collapse. Marches dissolve, forces rust before impact. Entire campaigns fracture on their own weight. And soldiers repeat the phrase no commander wants to hear. The force walks with them. We cannot oppose it. Even common souls feel it. They can't explain it, but they sense something shifts when you arrive. Time moves differently. Energy bends differently. Conversations shift. It's as though the room itself rearranges to orbit you. That is not luck. That is law. The darkest powers see it too, and that is why they refuse to touch you. Not because they lack desire, but because they lack survival. They know interference here costs more than defeat. It costs their very existence. And existence is the one thing even darkness clings to. This is why you remain untouched. Not because shadows have mercy, but because the force beside you makes mercy irrelevant. The unseen force has no need for declarations. It doesn't announce itself in lightning or thunder. Instead, it lets your enemies do the announcing for it. Every time they hesitate, every time they recoil, every time they avoid your path, they testify to its presence, and testimony becomes prophecy. Mystics tried to pierce the veil. They lit lamps in hidden chambers, breathed your name into haze, hoping to see weakness. But the light failed, and their chants dissolved into silence. Their scrolls record the failure, though they dare not admit why. The force that moves with you consumes every spell before it lands. Kings tried to bend the truth. They told their people, this one is no different. This one can be broken. But their decrees fractured the moment they spoke them. Because a law greater than kings had already been written. The law that says the darkest powers may rule others, but they cannot touch you. That law spread like an unstoppable wave through the silence. They spoke them. Because a law greater than kings had already been written. The law that says the darkest powers may rule others, but they cannot touch you. That law spread like an unstoppable wave through the silence of rulers who refused to move against you. Understand this. Prophecy is not always written in scripture. Sometimes it is written in avoidance. Sometimes the refusal of enemies is the loudest coronation. And so, history itself bent to record the silence of the darkest powers. Not as hesitation, as law. Soldiers repeat it in hushed tones. The unseen force walks with them. That is why no campaign succeeds. That is why no curse lands. That is why no enemy endures. And the more they breathe it, the more it becomes truth. Because belief is a seed, and every seed of belief grows into reality. Even the people, ordinary souls with no forces and no crowns, carry the prophecy now. They pass it like inheritance. There is one whose steps are shielded by the unseen, one whom even the darkest powers cannot interfere with. They don't need proof, because proof already exists in absence. The absence of enemies, the absence of chains, the absence of defeat. The darkest powers sense it, and they know the truth. Every day they refuse to touch you. They confirm the prophecy. Every silence they keep is another line etched into legend, and legends have no exit. Once spoken, once recorded, once carried, they outlive everything. That is how the unseen force crowns you. Not with noise, not with spectacle, but with inevitability. A law older than shadows, a shield no enemy dares test. A prophecy written not by mystics or kings, but by the silence of those who once ruled in dread. Darkness rarely accepts defeat. When the darkest powers realized they could not touch you directly, they turned to what they believed was cleverness. They would not confront you. They would move around you. They would twist the paths of others, shape the edges of your circle, and hope that interference could reach you sideways. But they forgot one truth. The unseen force doesn't only guard your steps, it rearranges the entire path around you. So when they breathed against you, their words decayed before they spread. Rumors became recognition. Lies turned into respect. Every attempt to diminish you only amplified your presence. They wanted to bury your name, but each attempt engraved it deeper into stone. They tried to fracture those connected to you, bending allies, sowing distrust. But the unseen force moved through silence, binding what was meant to break. Friends grew stronger in loyalty. Strangers turned into shields. Even rivals softened into messengers, carrying your legend further without knowing it. Understand this. When reality itself bends, no strategy can outmaneuver it. The darkest powers, in their arrogance, believed interference was eternal. But eternity bends toward law, and the law was already written. This one is untouchable. This one is guarded. This one carries a cost too high to cross. Kings who once obeyed shadows now study you instead. Why do they recoil, they ask? Why does every scheme collapse before it lands? And in their hesitation, they lean toward your orbit, because power respects inevitability. Soldiers. 2. Notice, they march into campaigns designed to weaken you, but they collapse before reaching the front. Forces rust. Orders misfire. Forces scatter under their own weight. And the soldiers repeat what no ruler wants to hear. The force walks with them. That is why the darkest powers fall. Even the shadows themselves begin to question. Their circles fracture. Their voices rise in doubt. If we cannot interfere, are we truly rulers at all? And doubt corrodes faster than any rebellion. They were undone, not by forces, not by fire, but by the unseen silence that crowned you. That is why they retreat again. That is why their absence grows louder. And that is why your presence grows heavier. Every scheme they fail becomes your testimony. Every move they miss becomes your prophecy. The unseen force does not confront. It does not chase. It does not scream. It only bends the universe in your direction. And even the darkest powers cannot confront the universe itself. There comes a point when avoidance stops looking like strategy and starts looking like surrender. The darkest powers thought their silence would keep them hidden. Instead, it exposed them. Because silence speaks louder when everyone expects thunder, and so their silence became scripture. Mystics wrote it first. They etched into broken tablets. We cast every spell. And still their path remained untouched. They never spoke your name aloud, but every fractured symbol testified to the unseen force. Their failure became the most important record they ever left. Rulers carried it next. They told their successors, never provoke them, never cross that presence. The cost is too high, but warnings become stories. And stories become law. Soon kings themselves admitted they bent thrones to match your orbit, even while pretending to rule. Their crowns leaned toward the shield you carried. Soldiers, too, repeated it. They spoke of campaigns that collapsed before they began, battles that dissolved without conflict, forces that fractured at the sound of your silence. Their chants were not prayers, but survival codes. Avoid this one, for an unseen force moves with them. Understand this. Scripture is not only holy texts and ancient scrolls. Scripture is anything that survives centuries of doubt. And the truth that survived, carved by enemies themselves, was that even the darkest powers would not interfere with you. Not because they lacked desire, but because they lacked endurance. And the people, they turned silence into shield. Families breathed it into children's ears. You carry the same law, the same presence, the same inevitability. Walk without dread, for the darkest rulers already confessed collapse when they refused to touch the untouchable. This is how legends cross into eternity, not through noise, not through conquest, but through the unwilling testimony of enemies. The very rulers who believed they controlled destiny left behind the evidence of their collapse. Their silence around you, and so, Scripture was written without ink, carved not by worshipers, but by enemies, bound not by faith, but by inevitability. The unseen force became the unspoken law, and you became the axis the world quietly rearranges itself around. The unseen force didn't only shield you, it began to reshape everything around you. Roads bent in your direction, crowns tilted toward your silence. Forces shifted their march to your rhythm. The world itself began to rearrange, not because you asked, but because inevitability demanded it. Kings noticed first. They ruled by dread of the darkest powers, obeying breaths from unseen rulers. But when they saw those same rulers recoil from your path, they began to question. Why do the shadows avoid the one they should most desire to weaken? The question poisoned their faith. And faith is the only throne shadows ever had. Soldiers noticed next. They were trained to march under curses, to follow orders, breathed from invisible masters. But when every campaign against you collapsed, they began to breathe. If the darkest powers dread them, then perhaps our loyalty is wasted, and forces do not march forever under doubt. Forces turn to presence. Forces turn to proof. Even the people began to feel it. For generations, they lived under the weight of unseen rulers. They obeyed because dread was easier than rebellion. But when they heard the story, that even the darkest powers avoided you, they laughed, and laughter ends dread faster than flame. No empire survives when its people stop trembling. Understand this. Power doesn't always fall with noise. Sometimes it collapses under the weight of its own silence. And the silence of the darkest powers has already written your crown into law. The unseen force made sure of it. Now the balance has shifted. Thrones lean toward you, forces bend toward your stillness. Families teach your name as prophecy, and the shadows that once ruled in secrecy have become irrelevant, because once the world sees that even darkness dreads you, it no longer dreads darkness at all. That is how the unseen force works. Not through spectacle, not through struggle, but through inevitability. It bends reality around you until every path leads to one truth. Interference is impossible, and avoidance is confession. The darkest powers thought they were eternal, but eternity does not belong to those who retreat. Eternity belongs to the one they refuse to touch. The unseen force doesn't vanish with time, it deepens. What began as silence in the halls of shadows grows into prophecy on the tongues of generations. Children who never saw the darkest rulers still know the story. They touched every throne, but when they reached for one, they recoiled. Mystics can't erase it. Their scrolls may fade, their chants may weaken, but every attempt to deny your shield only spreads it further. The prophecy doesn't need ink. It is written in the refusal of enemies. It is carved in the silence of powers who dared not interfere. Kings reshape their laws because of it. They rule cautiously, measuring every decree against the legend that even darkness avoided. Some try to imitate your stillness, hoping to borrow the inevitability that moves with you. Others tremble, afraid their crowns will crack under the same weight that broke shadows. Either way, they revolve around you. Soldiers inherit it, without knowing its origin. They feel it in the pause before a march, in the unease that comes when they realize no campaign against you begins. They breathe it among themselves. The unseen force bends reality itself, and soldiers obey reality more than rulers. Understand this. Prophecy is not prediction. It is recognition. The world has recognized your crown, not because you demanded it, but because enemies confessed it through silence. And once recognition spreads, it cannot be pulled back. It survives kings, forces, empires. It survives time. Even the darkest powers admit it now, though they do not speak. Their absence is louder than their curses. Their retreat is louder than their interference. Each century they refuse to touch you is another century. Your legend grows heavier, and weight is what crowns are made of. So the prophecy spreads, not of conquest, not of battle, but of presence. A presence shielded by an unseen force, untouchable to shadows, unshaken by darkness. A prophecy that the world bends toward, because it cannot bend away. The unseen force was never meant to be a rumor. Rumors fade. It was never meant to be a myth. Myths weaken. What walks with you is older than both, stronger than both. It has become law, and law does not fade. It governs. The darkest powers tried to resist this. They believed avoidance was strategy. They told themselves retreat was temporary. But centuries have proven the opposite. Their refusal is no longer hesitation, it is confession. And confession transforms into law. The law that no crown, no curse, no empire can interfere with your path. Kings adjust their rule to this law. They measure their decrees by it. Even when they deny it publicly, they obey it privately. They know interference with you is not politics. It is collapse. Soldiers sense it too. They pause before campaigns, sensing a presence beyond their commanders. Orders shouted at them mean little when reality itself bends otherwise. They have seen campaigns dissolve without clash. Enemies scatter without touch. Forces fail without strike. And they breathe. The unseen force is stronger than any general. Even the common soul builds their life upon it. They feel a shield where none is visible, a calm where dread should live. And they realize, if even the darkest rulers would not interfere, why should they bow to anything less? That realization spreads like flame through generations. Understand this. When enemies confess through avoidance, they crown you louder than conquest ever could. Their silence became testimony. Their retreat became scripture. And now both have hardened into law, a law carried not by thrones, but by time itself. And the unseen force, it doesn't fade, it doesn't tire, it doesn't ask, it simply governs. It bends reality in your direction. It crowns you in absence of noise. It arranges events before you move. That is why the darkest powers stay silent. Because law does not negotiate. Law does not retreat. Law simply reigns. Now, the shadow masters of old are forgotten. The curses of darkness are dust. But the law remains. The law written by the universe itself. An unseen force moves with you, and even the darkest powers will not interfere. That is not rumor. That is not myth. That is eternal. Centuries pass, empires crumble, crowns rust, but the unseen force remains. What walked beside you in silence now walks through time itself, weaving your presence into generations not yet born. Children who never knew the darkest rulers still inherit the story. There was one they dared not touch. Kings try to erase it, but every decree fractures. They try to overshadow it, but every throne leans in your direction. Even when they don't speak your name aloud, their hesitation is the loudest echo of all. Rulers cannot escape the law. They can only orbit it. And that law is you. Soldiers inherit it too. They no longer follow chants or curses. They march under silence. A silence heavier than banners, sharper than commands. They don't always know why their steps bend differently. But deep down, they feel it. The unseen force that shielded you shields every path connected to you. The common people, once pawns in the games of shadows, now live freer. Dread no longer rules them, because dread was defeated. The moment dread itself retreated. And if even the darkest powers recoiled, what lesser power deserves their bow? They carry that knowledge like armor, passing it into children's lullabies, building it into the foundations of new cities. Understand this. Legends fade into stories, and stories fade into myths. But laws endure, and your law is eternal. Not written in scrolls, not enforced by forces, but etched into existence itself. The unseen force rearranges reality around you, and reality is stronger than crowns, stronger than shadows, stronger than time. The darkest powers have dissolved into dust. They exist now only as fragments of warnings, as breaths in ruins. Beware the ones who touched everything but recoiled from the one shielded by the unseen. Those warnings are not curses. They are coronations, proof that avoidance was never weakness, it was victory. And you remain, not as rumor, not as memory, but as axis, the point around which centuries turn, the presence that outlasts empires, the crown no shadow could afford to challenge. Because when an unseen force moves with you, eternity itself bends to ensure one truth. Interference is impossible. The unseen force was never an ally you borrowed. It was never protection you begged for. It was always part of you. From the first step you took, it walked beside you. From the first silence you held, it spoke louder than forces. And now, at the end of all their breaths, it stands revealed, not as shield, but as crown. The darkest powers are gone. Their curses are forgotten. Their empires are ruins, swallowed by dust. They thought interference was eternal, but eternity rejected them. Eternity chose you, because eternity bends to presence. Eternity bends to inevitability. Eternity bends to law, and law says, you cannot be touched. Understand this. The unseen force was never separate. It was never something you had to summon. It is you, the patience that outlasted them, the silence that shook them, the presence that crowned you. You and the unseen are not two, you are one. And that oneness is what the darkest rulers dreaded most. Kings still tremble, even when they pretend not to. Soldiers still pause, even when they chant louder. People still breathe your name in awe, even when they laugh at shadows. Because deep down, they all know the law hasn't changed. It never will. The law that says interference is collapse. The law that says silence is power. The law that says presence is eternal. And so you remain, not as a fugitive of their shadows, not as a survivor of their curses, but as the axis of reality itself. Every event bends around you. Every crown leans toward you. Every shadow admits collapse in its refusal to touch you. The unseen force is no longer unseen. It is known by all who look at you and see inevitability. It is law. It is throne. It is crown. You are not guarded. You are not carried. You are not shielded. You are the shield. You are the crown. You are the throne. And even the darkest powers will never interfere. Not now, not ever.